I knew the number one rule about Ouija boards: never use one alone. But that night I did exactly that. It was raining, I was bored, and curiosity got the better of me. I figured it was harmless, just a piece of cardboard and wood, right? I only wanted to take a few photos for my art project, but the moment the planchette moved, I felt it. The temperature dropped, the lights flickered, and something shifted in the air like I wasn't alone anymore. I thought I was imagining things until the footsteps started. That was when I knew I'd made a mistake. I was in my second year of art school, living alone in a small basement apartment in Milwaukee. It wasn't much, one bedroom, one bathroom, always a little damp, but it was cheap and quiet, which was all I needed. That month, we were assigned a poster project on the theme of the supernatural. I didn't want to go with the usual vampires or ghosts, so I ordered a Ouija board off eBay, thinking it would make for some cool, moody reference photos. When it arrived, the box was old and slightly warped, with the word Ouija faded across the top. I set it on my dining table and took a few photos under dim lighting. But then I paused. I don't know what got into me. Maybe it was the rain tapping against the windows, or the silence of the apartment, or maybe just that creeping itch of boredom. I remembered all those stories online, the warnings, the horror threads, and thought, why not? So I turned off the overhead light, sat at the table alone, and placed both hands lightly on the planchette. I didn't really expect anything to happen. It was just a board game, or at least that's what I told myself. I started by asking the usual questions. Is anyone there? And can you hear me? Half laughing at myself between each one. For a few minutes, nothing happened. The planchette didn't budge, and I figured I'd wasted my time. But then, just as I was about to pack it up, it moved. Slowly, almost hesitantly, it slid to the word yes. I froze, unsure whether I'd imagined it or nudged it without realizing. I asked, "What's your name?" It spelled out ROWEN. I asked how old they were, 3 to 4. That's when the air in the room felt different, colder, heavier, like something had entered with the name. I leaned back, trying to laugh it off. "Okay, that's enough," I muttered, and tried to move the planchette to "goodbye." But it wouldn't move. It felt stuck. At that moment, the ceiling light flickered twice, then went completely out. I sat in total darkness, and that's when I heard it. Soft, dragging footsteps in the hallway just beyond the kitchen. I knew the front door was locked. No windows were open. I sat frozen, listening. The footsteps stopped outside my bedroom door, then silence. I didn't even breathe. Something was standing there, watching, waiting. The next morning, I convinced myself it was just my imagination, some sleep-deprived mix of stress and suggestion. I stuffed the Ouija board back into its box, shoved it deep into the hall closet, and went on with my day like nothing happened. But that night, something changed. At exactly 3 a.m., I woke up to a sharp, deliberate knocking on the wall behind my bed. 3 slow knocks, evenly spaced. Thump, thump, thump. My heart was pounding. I sat up, staring at the wall. No pipes ran through there. It was a concrete basement wall. I waited, holding my breath, but it didn't happen again. I eventually fell back asleep. The next night, it happened again. Same time, same number of knocks. This time, it was on the ceiling, as if someone was walking above me. But there was no one upstairs. My neighbors had moved out the week before. On the third night, I didn't sleep. I stayed up with the lights on, waiting. And when the clock hit 3 a.m., I heard something new, a low, croaking whisper that I couldn't quite understand, like someone murmuring from the corner of the room. Then came the dream. I saw a child, maybe 6 years old, standing at the foot of my bed. His skin was blackened, cracked like burnt wood. Half his face was melted. But his eyes were still whole, wide, staring into me. He didn't speak. He only pointed to the closet, the same one where I had stored the Ouija board. I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. The closet door was open. I knew then this wasn't my imagination. Something had answered me that night at the table, and it hadn't gone away. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it would fade if I just didn't acknowledge it, but it only got worse. Every night at 3 a.m. I heard something. The knocks, the whispers, the dragging footsteps. One night I heard breathing, not mine, from just outside my bedroom door. I didn't dare open it. I stayed curled under the covers, lights on, shaking. I stopped sleeping in my room. I moved to the living room couch, left the TV on low volume all night, just to drown out the silence. But even then, I'd see shadows shift in the hallway or hear a soft giggle from the kitchen. The apartment felt infected. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I contacted a local church and begged to speak with a priest. I didn't even know what to say. I just told him something was wrong in my home, something I couldn't explain. He agreed to come over and bless the apartment. He was kind, didn't question me. He walked through each room, praying softly, sprinkling holy water. When he reached the closet where I kept the Ouija board, he paused, then said quietly, "You should get rid of this. Don't just hide it, remove it completely." That night I took the board out. I didn't even touch it with bare hands, used a towel to wrap it, shoved it into a trash bag, and drove 20 minutes to a public dumpster behind a gas station. I dumped it without looking back. When I got home, the apartment was quiet. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. But I still wake up sometimes at 3 a.m. just to check, just to make sure I'm still alone. It's been 3 years, and I haven't touched a Ouija board since. I don't know what I contacted that night, if it was really someone named Rowan or something pretending to be him, but I know it followed me. I've moved since then, started fresh, but sometimes I still wake up at 3 a.m., heart pounding, listening for knocks that never come. If you're thinking about trying a Ouija board for fun, especially alone, don't. You might think it's just a game. That's what I thought too. But once you open that door, you don't get to choose what walks through it. I never believed in ghosts, demons, or Ouija boards. To me, it was all just urban legend nonsense, fun for movies or late-night dares, but never real. That was before I stayed at my aunt's house deep in the Colorado woods, before I found the old wooden Ouija board hidden in her attic, before I used it alone. I only asked a few questions, just enough to feel stupid. But then the planchette moved, slowly, deliberately, and dispelled something that still makes my skin crawl. That night I didn't sleep in the bedroom, because someone, was under the bed. And it knew my name. My aunt's house sat alone in the Colorado mountains, miles from the nearest neighbor, surrounded by trees that creaked in the wind even when the air felt still. She was a collector of antiques, strange ones mostly, and her house reflected that. Dusty dolls with glass eyes, old photographs in oval frames, oil lamps, and music boxes that didn't play anymore. When she asked me to house sit while she flew to Italy for an antique convention, I thought it'd be the perfect getaway. I was 22, a college student burned out from midterms, and the idea of peace and isolation sounded almost therapeutic. The first day went quietly. I explored the house, flipped through some old books, made coffee, and soaked in the silence. It wasn't until after dinner, when the sun dipped behind the trees, that I got the idea to explore the attic. I wanted to find something interesting, maybe photograph a weird old object to show my girlfriend. I found a box tucked behind a stack of dusty suitcases. Inside, a hand-carved wooden Ouija board, old but in perfect condition. I didn't plan to use it, I really didn't. But the night was quiet, and my curiosity got the better of me. I set the Ouija board down on the living room rug, more amused than anything else. The lights were dim, the fireplace crackling behind me, and the whole house had that strange, antique smell. Wood, old paper, and something slightly sour. I placed my fingers lightly on the planchette and asked the classic opener, almost laughing, "Is anyone here?" At first, nothing. I waited, smirking at myself for being ridiculous, but just as I was about to lift my hands, the planchette nudged. Barely. I froze. "What's your name?" I asked. The planchette moved again, slowly this time, sliding letter to letter. M-I-C-H-A-E-L. I swallowed hard. "How old are you?" 1 to 9. A gust of cold air brushed the back of my neck, though no windows were open. Then, without me asking, the planchette continued to move, faster now, dragging itself across the board like it had something urgent to say. It spelled out H-E-I-S-U-N-D-E-R T-H-E-B-E-D. I stared at it. That was when the floorboard behind me creaked. I spun around expecting to see something, standing there. But there was nothing. Just the flickering shadows from the fireplace stretching along the walls. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone anymore. My heart was pounding. I scooped the board and planchette into the box and shoved it under the coffee table, like hiding it would undo what just happened. I didn't sleep in the bedroom that night. I laid on the living room couch, TV on low, just to fill the silence. I kept telling myself it was in my head. Maybe I'd moved the planchette unconsciously. Maybe the draft was real. But around 3 a.m., I heard something I couldn't explain, a slow, deliberate scratching beneath the couch. It wasn't loud. It was soft, almost polite. But it was there, and it lasted for nearly a minute. I sat up, holding my breath, staring at the floor like it might move. When the scratching stopped, I stayed awake until dawn. The next day, I searched under the couch. Of course, there was nothing. That night, I tried sleeping in the bedroom again. Everything seemed fine until I woke up in the dark, sweating. The room was cold. Too cold. I looked down at the end of the bed, and the blanket was slowly lifting, like someone underneath it was crawling toward me. I jumped up and turned on the light. No one there, nothing under the bed. But I swear, for just a second before I flipped the switch, I saw a hand, pale, thin, retreating into the shadows. That was the moment I stopped pretending this was a joke. Something was in that house with me. And it wasn't just passing through. I wanted to leave, but it wasn't that simple. My aunt had left me her car, but the winding mountain roads at night were dangerous, especially in the fog that had started rolling in. So I told myself I'd wait until morning, just a few more hours. I barricaded the bedroom door with a chair, stuffed a towel under the crack, and left every light on. I didn't try to sleep. I just sat on the edge of the bed, eyes fixed on the floor. At 2:59 a.m., the lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely. The silence that followed was crushing. Then I heard it, the soft creak of the floorboards just outside the bedroom door, followed by a slow dragging sound like bare feet sliding across wood. It stopped right outside. I held my breath. Suddenly, the door rattled violently, but didn't open. Then came the voice, right in my ear. "Don't look away." I spun around in the darkness. Nothing. When the lights came back, I was alone again. But something had changed. I could feel it, like the walls were watching. That morning, I packed everything, locked the house, and drove until I hit cell service. I didn't tell my aunt. I just said I left early. I've stayed in a lot of strange places since, but I've never touched another Ouija board. And I've never ever looked under the bed at night, because I still hear it sometimes, soft scratching beneath the mattress. I live in a completely different state now. But whatever I contacted that night, I don't think it stayed behind. It's been months. But I still wake up at 3 a.m. some nights, heart racing, listening for sounds I hope I won't hear. I've moved, thrown out that old board, and tried to forget everything. But something changed in me that night, something I can't fully explain. So here's my advice. Don't use a Ouija board, especially not alone. You might think it's harmless, just a spooky game. But if something answers, you may not be the one asking questions anymore. And if it tells you it's under the bed, believe it. Because once you invite something in, it doesn't always leave. I'm not a superstitious person. In fact, I teach a college course on the psychology of belief, how fear, suggestion, and pattern recognition shape what we think is paranormal. I thought I understood it all. Until last fall, when I moved into a 3-story Victorian house near campus with 2 students. The 3rd floor was off limits, supposedly just for storage. But after we found an old Ouija board hidden in the living room, things changed. We played once, just once. That night something answered. And when we finally opened the door to the 3rd floor, we realized we were the ones being watched. I moved into the house at the beginning of October, just as the weather in Oregon turned cold and the trees along campus started shedding leaves. The place was a 3-story Victorian just a few blocks from the university, with creaky wood floors, tall windows, and that musty smell old houses never quite shake. I shared it with 2 students, Mason and Eli, both around 21, both studying psychology like me. I was their TA, technically their senior, though we got along more like roommates. From the start, there was one rule from the landlord: do not go to the 3rd floor. She said it was used for storage and not safe. Something about weak floorboards. The door wasn't locked, but it had an old sign nailed to it: do not enter. None of us thought much of it, until Eli started mentioning weird things: footsteps above his room at night, chairs creaking when no one was upstairs, even faint whispers. Mason and I dismissed it as stress or overactive imagination, but Eli wasn't the type to make stuff up. Then, one night, we found a wooden box stuffed in the TV stand drawer, one none of us had noticed before. Inside it was a Ouija board, old, hand-carved, too detailed to be a toy. We gathered around the coffee table that night, more curious than scared. Eli was convinced we had to try it, just to see what happens, he said. Mason rolled his eyes but sat down anyway. I hesitated, but in the end I gave in. We dimmed the lights, lit a candle, and placed our fingers lightly on the planchette. Eli asked the first question, "Is anyone here with us?" At first, nothing. Then the planchette began to move, slow, dragging, like it was waking up. It spelled Adrian. We looked at each other, half laughing, half nervous. Eli asked, "How old are you?" Then I asked, "How did you die?" The planchette moved again, this time more quickly, tracing out Stairs, stairs. All three of us turned to glance toward the dark hallway where the staircase to the third floor stood. Eli immediately pulled his hand away. "I'm done," he said. Mason muttered something about someone pushing it as a prank, but no one admitted to it. We packed the board back up, but that night, none of us slept. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to a sound directly above me. 3 distinct knocks on the ceiling. Not random creaks, not the wind. Precise, spaced-out knocks. I stared at the plaster overhead, heart racing. My room was on the 2nd floor. Above me was the 3rd floor, the room we weren't supposed to enter. I lay there frozen, hoping I'd imagined it. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Eli. "You heard that too?" A minute later, Mason replied, "Not funny. Don't mess with me." No one was joking. The next morning, we checked the staircase. The door to the 3rd floor was still shut, but something felt off, like the air around it was heavier. We didn't open it. None of us wanted to be the first. Over the next few nights, the knocking continued. Always 3 taps. Always around 3 a.m. Once, Mason swore he heard the floorboards above his bed creak, like someone was pacing slowly back and forth. Eli said he saw the candle from our Ouija session relight itself the next evening. He'd blown it out before going to class. We stopped talking about it. But we all knew something had changed since that night. We had invited something in, and though the board was packed away, something wasn't finished with us. We were afraid to play again, but we were more afraid of what might happen if we didn't. Every noise, every shadow, every creak felt deliberate, like a reply, like we had started a conversation with something that didn't want it to end. And every night, that door at the top of the stairs seemed to feel less like a boundary and more like a mouth waiting to open. A week later, we couldn't take it anymore. Eli hadn't slept in days. Mason had started keeping a knife under his pillow, and I'd been waking up every night at 3 a.m., drenched in sweat, convinced someone was standing at the foot of my bed, though no one was ever there when I turned the light on. So we decided to go up. It was a gray afternoon, raining lightly, the kind of day where shadows felt heavier than usual. Mason grabbed a flashlight. Eli held the Ouija board like it was some kind of shield, and I turned the doorknob. The door opened without a sound. The 3rd floor was one long room, coated in dust. The floorboards moaned under our weight. There were boxes stacked against the walls, old furniture draped in white sheets, and in the center of the room, a wooden chair, just one, facing the door. We stepped inside cautiously. That's when Eli saw it, chalk writing on the far wall. Faint but legible, "Stop calling me." None of us said a word. Suddenly the door slammed shut behind us. The flashlight flickered and died. In the dark we heard it, footsteps circling us. Heavy, measured, close. Eli screamed. We threw the door open and bolted down the stairs, not stopping until we reached the kitchen. We didn't go back up. Not that day. Not ever again. Mason moved out that weekend. Eli transferred dorms. I stayed, mostly because I wanted to believe it didn't happen. that it was mass suggestion, sleep deprivation, shared hysteria. But every now and then I still hear it, 3 knocks on my ceiling. And I still wonder, if Adrian didn't want us to call him, why did he keep answering? It's been months since we touched that board, but I still don't sleep through the night. The 3rd floor stays locked now. I even nailed the door shut. But sometimes at 3 a.m., I still hear footsteps above my room, pacing slowly, like someone waiting for a reply. If you ever find a Ouija board, don't treat it like a game. Don't ask questions you don't want answers to. And never assume nothing is listening just because the room feels empty. Because once something knows your name, it doesn't always leave when you stop talking. Sometimes that's when it really begins.
And the man inside wasn't offering shelter. If you've ever driven through the mountain roads in Washington state, you know how quiet it gets at night. Just endless trees, winding turns, and not another soul for miles. Some people find that peaceful. I used to. Last fall, my car broke down on one of those roads near mile marker 59. There was no cell service, no passing cars, and only one cabin with a light on. I thought knocking on the door was my best shot at help, but I was wrong. That wasn't a place for travelers. My name's Eli. I'm 29, work in software, and last fall I decided to take a solo camping trip through the Pacific Northwest. No cell phone, no emails, just me in the woods. I drove up from Seattle, planning to hit a few campgrounds near the Cascades before the weather got too cold. I had all my gear packed and took the scenic route through the mountains. It was supposed to be peaceful. I sat there in the driver's seat, rain hammering the windshield, weighing my options. That's when I saw it, a warm yellow glow through the trees, maybe 50 yards off the road. A cabin, just one. I could make out a porch light and smoke coming from the chimney. The weather turned halfway through the second day. Rain started falling hard, and by dusk I was winding through a 2-lane road deep in the forest. No lights, no towns, just fog and trees. My car started sputtering around mile marker 59, then completely stalled out. I tried my phone, no signal. That was the last normal moment of that night. The rain was cold and steady as I made my way up the narrow path toward the cabin. It looked old, but well kept, stacked wood on the porch, windows glowing from inside. I knocked once. After a long pause, the door creaked open. It felt like a stroke of luck. I grabbed my jacket and flashlight, locked the car, and started walking toward it. A man in his 50s stood there, tall, wiry, with a graying beard and sunken eyes. He didn't smile. "Yeah," I said, shivering. Stalled back by the road. No service. "Car trouble?" he asked. He hesitated, then nodded. "You can come in for a bit. Warm up." He didn't talk much, just watched me while I drank. The inside smelled like firewood and old blankets. A kettle hissed on the stove. He poured me tea without asking and motioned for me to sit near the fireplace. It didn't feel like a home. That's when I noticed something strange. A small security camera tucked into the corner near the ceiling. I followed the wire as casually as I could. It ran into the wall. Then I noticed the inside of the front door had a heavy sliding bolt, the kind that locks from the outside. I told him I appreciated the tea, but I should probably get going. Maybe try walking down the road and flag someone down. It felt like a place designed to keep someone in, and I was starting to wonder if I'd made a huge mistake. He didn't say anything at first, just stared at the fire. Then not much traffic out here this time of night. I forced a chuckle, stood up, and thanked him again. When I reached for the doorknob, I realized there was no lock on the inside. The bolt, it could only be slid from the outside. That was the first real surge of panic. If you've ever driven through the mountain roads in Washington state, you know how quiet it gets at night. Just endless trees, winding turns, and not another soul for miles. Some people find that peaceful. I used to. Last fall, my car broke down on one of those roads near mile marker 59. There was no cell service, no passing cars, and only one cabin with a light on. I thought knocking on the door was my best shot at help, but I was wrong. That wasn't a place for travelers, and the man inside wasn't offering shelter. My name's Eli, I'm 29, work in software, and last fall I decided to take a solo camping trip through the Pacific Northwest. No cell phone, no emails, just me in the woods. I drove up from Seattle, planning to hit a few campgrounds near the Cascades before the weather got too cold. I had all my gear packed and took the scenic route through the mountains. It was supposed to be peaceful. The weather turned halfway through the second day. Rain started falling hard, and by dusk I was winding through a 2-lane road deep in the forest. No lights, no towns, just fog and trees. My car started sputtering around mile marker 59, then completely stalled out. I tried my phone, no signal. I sat there in the driver's seat, rain hammering the windshield, weighing my options. That's when I saw it. A warm yellow glow through the trees, maybe 50 yards off the road. A cabin, just one. I could make out a porch light and smoke coming from the chimney. It felt like a stroke of luck. I grabbed my jacket and flashlight, locked the car, and started walking toward it. That was the last normal moment of that night. The rain was cold and steady as I made my way up the narrow path toward the cabin. It looked old, but well kept, stacked wood on the porch, windows glowing from inside. I knocked once. After a long pause, the door creaked open. A man in his 50s stood there, tall, wiry, with a graying beard and sunken eyes. He didn't smile. "Car trouble?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, shivering. "Stalled back by the road. No service." He hesitated, then nodded. "You can come in for a bit. Warm up." The inside smelled like firewood and old blankets. A kettle hissed on the stove. He poured me tea without asking and motioned for me to sit near the fireplace. He didn't talk much, just watched me while I drank. That's when I noticed something strange. A small security camera tucked into the corner near the ceiling. I followed the wire as casually as I could. It ran into the wall. Then I noticed the inside of the front door had a heavy sliding bolt, the kind that locks from the outside. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a place designed to keep someone in, and I was starting to wonder if I'd made a huge mistake. I told him I appreciated the tea, but I should probably get going, maybe try walking down the road and flag someone down. He didn't say anything at first, just stared at the fire. Then not much traffic out here this time of night. I forced a chuckle, stood up, and thanked him again. When I reached for the doorknob, I realized there was no lock on the inside. The bolt, it could only be slid from the outside. That was the first real surge of panic. I casually excused myself, said I was just stepping out to get something from my car. He didn't stop me, just gave this slow nod and said, "Be careful, lots of animals out there." I stepped outside, heart pounding, rain still coming down hard. I didn't go to the car. Instead, I walked toward the trees, crouched behind a log, and waited. Something about that man wasn't right, and I needed to know what I was dealing with. After maybe 10 minutes, I saw it. The cabin door opened, and the man stepped onto the porch. He scanned the road, then the woods. Then he walked around back, out of sight. I crept closer to the side of the cabin, trying to stay quiet. Through a small side window, I saw another door, one that led to a back room I hadn't noticed earlier. He opened it. Inside, barely lit by a lantern, were backpacks. Multiple, coats, shoes, men's, women's, kids. Way too many for one man living alone. I felt my stomach drop. This wasn't his first visitor, and something told me the others hadn't walked back out. I didn't wait to see what he was doing in that back room. I turned and bolted into the woods, slipping in the mud, branches tearing at my jacket. I didn't care. I just ran. I didn't go back toward the road. I figured if he'd done this before, he'd know the obvious escape routes. I veered uphill, off trail, hoping the terrain would slow him down if he followed. After maybe 10 minutes of blind scrambling through the dark, I crouched behind a cluster of rocks and caught my breath. I didn't hear anything behind me, but I wasn't taking chances. Then I saw it, a faint light moving through the trees below me. A flashlight. He was out there, and he wasn't alone. Another beam flicked on, maybe 50 feet to the left. 2 of them, both scanning the woods. One of them called out, not to me, but to the other. Check the ridge. He didn't go far. That voice wasn't the man from the cabin. I was outnumbered. I waited until both lights moved downhill, then slipped the opposite direction, sticking close to the rocks. Eventually I found the road again. No idea how far I'd gone, but there it was. And somehow my car was gone. There were deep tire tracks where it had been, muddy footprints leading back toward the woods. I was done being quiet. I ran down the center of the highway, yelling like a lunatic, until a logging truck appeared around the bend. The driver pulled over, confused, alarmed. I jumped into his cab and begged him to drive. I didn't explain much. I just kept looking over my shoulder, because whoever those men were, they weren't out hunting animals. They were hunting people. The police took my report, but there wasn't much they could do. No one lived off mile marker 59, they said. No registered structures, no official cabins, just forest. They sent a search team out, but all they found were tracks that vanished into the trees. My car turned up 3 days later, abandoned at a rest stop 50 miles south. It had been wiped clean. No prints, no gear, nothing. I never went back. Now when people talk about backwoods cabins and peaceful getaways, I keep my mouth shut, because if I say what I really think, no one will believe me. So I'll say it here instead. If your car breaks down in the woods, stay with it. If you see a cabin with a light on, don't knock. And if someone opens the door too quickly, like they were expecting you, run. Because I don't think I was the first, and I know I won't be the last. I know this might sound dumb, but please never pick up a hitchhiker. I don't care if they look old, harmless, or like they need help. I made that mistake last year, and it almost got me killed. I was doing a solo road trip across the Southwest, trying to clear my head after a rough breakup. Long roads, empty skies, total peace, or so I thought. I stopped at this dusty old gas station in the middle of nowhere. I went in alone, but I didn't leave alone. I picked up a man who should have never been on the road. My name's Kyle. I'm 28, work in systems engineering, and I've always preferred being alone. That's probably why the idea of a solo road trip sounded perfect at the time. I'd just gotten out of a 3-year relationship, and I was spiraling. Couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, didn't want to talk to anyone. So I packed up my car and hit the road, heading south from Portland to Arizona. No strict plan, just music, gas stations, and the open highway. By the second day, I was driving through a stretch of desert, so empty, it felt like I was the last person alive. No traffic, no towns, just sand and silence. Around 4 p.m., I saw a beat-up old gas station, one of those roadside fossils that probably hadn't been updated since the 80s. I pulled in, stretched my legs, and used the bathroom in a concrete box that reeked of mildew and bleach. There was no attendant, just a flickering vending machine and the buzz of the wind. It felt eerie, but I brushed it off. Places like that are supposed to feel creepy, right? I topped off my gas tank, cracked a bottle of water, and was just about to leave when I saw him. He stepped out from behind the building like he'd been waiting. Older guy, maybe mid-50s, worn denim jacket, jeans, dusty boots, and a sun-bleached trucker hat pulled low over his eyes. He looked like someone's retired uncle who'd spent too long in the sun. He raised one hand in a lazy wave and walked straight toward my car. "South Ridge," he said. "You headed that way?" His voice was hoarse, dry. I hesitated, scanning the empty road behind me. There hadn't been a car for miles. South Ridge was about 20 minutes off my route. I figured it wouldn't hurt. He looked harmless, tired even. I nodded and unlocked the passenger door. He climbed in slowly, holding a black canvas duffel bag tight to his chest. I noticed he didn't buckle his seatbelt, just stared out the windshield like he had somewhere urgent to be. I tried to make small talk, asking if he was from around here. He didn't answer at first, then just mumbled something about family trouble. The silence grew heavy. Every time I glanced over, I caught him looking at me, not in a friendly way, but like he was studying me, watching how I moved, like he was waiting. About 15 minutes in, he spoke again, calm, almost casual. "You're gonna take the next right." I blinked. "What?" "Next right. It'll take us to South Ridge quicker." I glanced at my GPS. There was no road showing up, just a dirt path, barely wide enough for a single car, cutting off into a patch of scraggly trees. I slowed a little, but didn't turn. "I think I'll stay on the main road," I said, trying to sound light. "GPS says it's just a few more miles this way." He didn't respond, just clutched his bag tighter. That's when I noticed it. The bag moved. Just a little, a subtle shift, like something inside had repositioned itself. At first I thought I imagined it, but then it twitched again, and I heard it. A soft, wet rustling sound, like damp fabric being squeezed. My stomach dropped. I looked at him. He'd seen me notice. His eyes narrowed. "Don't look in the bag," he said quietly. I swallowed hard and faced forward. Then I felt it, a shift in the air, like something dangerous had just clicked into place. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a folding knife, and rested it lightly in his lap. "Turn at the next one," he said again, this time without looking at me. I nodded, pretending to comply, but panic was starting to rise in my throat. The car felt smaller, hotter. I could hear my own heartbeat. I had no idea what was in that bag. I didn't want to know, but whatever it wasn't clothes. And now I was driving, alone, in the middle of nowhere, with a man holding a knife and a bag full of God knows what, and he wanted me to go somewhere off the map. I knew I had to make a move soon, or I wasn't getting out of this. I kept my eyes on the road, pretending to search for the dirt turnoff, while my mind raced. I didn't know if he'd actually used the knife, but I wasn't about to find out. My hands were sweating so badly, the steering wheel felt slippery. Then, maybe a quarter mile ahead, I saw a slight bend in the road with loose gravel and a shallow dip, just enough to cause a bump if I braked suddenly. An idea hit me. I swallowed hard, glanced sideways. He was still staring straight ahead, knife in his lap, fingers drumming slowly on the canvas bag, like he had all the time in the world. I whispered, "Sorry." "What?" Before he could react, I slammed the brakes hard. The car jerked violently, his body pitching forward as the seatbeltless fool lurched toward the dash. In that half-second of chaos, I reached across him, grabbed the knife, and threw it out the open driver's window. He screamed, more out of shock than pain, then started shouting at me, clawing at the door handle, trying to grab my arm. I didn't wait. I slammed the gas, tires screeching, and the sudden acceleration knocked him off balance. He shouted again, something unintelligible, angry, panicked. I didn't look at him. I just drove. I pushed the car to 90, not caring about the noise, the heat, or the fact that we were veering into hills with no cell service. I just needed to reach anything. A town, a store, a person. In my peripheral vision, I could see him trying to regain composure, reaching for the bag. "No," I growled, and swerved hard. The bag slipped to the floor. The second it did, he scrambled to pick it up like it was more important than his own life. I finally saw a weathered sign. Ridgeview Diner, 2 miles. I headed straight for it, praying anyone would be there when I arrived, and that I wasn't already too late. I pulled into the Ridgeview Diner's gravel lot, going way too fast, tires crunching as I skidded to a stop. I jumped out of the car and screamed for help. A couple of locals came running. When they saw the man in my passenger seat, clutching that filthy duffel, they backed away. He didn't fight. He just opened the door, stepped out calmly, and ran. By the time the sheriff arrived, he was long gone, vanished into the trees behind the diner. They found the knife a mile back on the road. The bag, he took it with him. Whatever was inside, I never found out. But I still hear it sometimes, the soft, wet rustling. So listen to me. Don't do what I did. Don't let your guilt or your curiosity override your instincts. Because one day, you might stop for a stranger and never drive away again. If you've ever driven long distance at night, you know how easy it is to lose focus. You start talking to yourself, blasting music, slapping your own face, anything to stay awake. That's what I was doing when I pulled into Rest Stop 43 off I-55. I just needed a bathroom break, 5 minutes to breathe and stretch. It looked clean, quiet, well lit, perfect, honestly. But if I'd known someone was already there, watching, waiting for me to leave my car unlocked, I would have kept driving, no matter how tired I was. Because someone nearly got into my car that night. My name's Alex. I'm 32. Live alone in Southern Illinois. And I've done more solo road trips than I can count. I'm used to long hours behind the wheel, gas stations, energy drinks, fast food, the whole routine. This particular trip wasn't for fun though. I was driving back home after attending my uncle's funeral in Springfield. It was a long, exhausting day. By the time I hit the interstate, it was close to 1 a.m. and my eyelids were getting heavy. I knew I needed to pull over. Falling asleep behind the wheel wasn't an option, so I took the next available exit for a rest stop. The sign said Rest Stop 43, 1 mile. When I got there, it looked decent. Bright lights, clean sidewalk, a vending machine that still worked. Not a single other car in the lot though, which felt odd but not alarming. I parked under one of the overhead lights, locked the doors out of habit, and jogged to the restroom. I wasn't planning to sleep, just use the bathroom and splash water on my face. Quick stop, in and out. But when I came back to my car, something was off. At first, I couldn't figure out what felt wrong. My car looked the same. No broken glass, no signs of tampering. But when I reached for the driver's door, I realized it wasn't fully closed. It was slightly ajar, like someone had opened it and didn't shut it all the way. That stopped me cold. I was sure I'd locked it. I always lock it, even just for bathroom breaks. I told myself maybe I'd hit the unlock button without realizing, or maybe the door hadn't latched properly. But then I opened it and noticed something else. The floor mat on the passenger side had a smudge of dirt on it. I hadn't picked anyone up. No one else had been in my car that day. The dirt looked fresh, like it came from the gravel just outside the rest stop. I leaned in, heart pounding now, and looked into the back seat. There was a faint imprint, like someone had sat there recently. The seat wasn't indented enough to be obvious, but it was there. I backed away slowly, scanning the empty lot. My phone had no service. Something had happened while I was inside that bathroom, and whoever did it might still be nearby. I did a slow circle around my car, trying to stay calm, telling myself I was overthinking, But when I got to the back, the tension in my chest locked tight. The trunk was open, not wide, just slightly popped, like someone had pulled the lever from inside the car, but hadn't bothered to lift it. I hadn't opened the trunk. I hadn't touched it all day. I stared at it for a long second, then reached out and lifted it, holding my breath. It was empty, but the carpet inside looked scuffed, like someone had been inside and left in a hurry. My hands were shaking now. I slammed it shut, took a step back, and then I heard it. A soft creak, like a shoe pressing on gravel. I turned fast, scanning the tree line that framed the rest stop. Nothing moved, but I had the unmistakable feeling of being watched. Still no cell service, no other cars, no cameras I could see, just me and whoever had just been in my vehicle. I climbed into the driver's seat, locked every door, and scanned the mirrors. The back seat was empty, but I didn't trust it. Just as I went to start the engine, the motion light near the restroom flicked on. Something had triggered it. I stared at the small brick building, waiting, watching. A few seconds later, I saw a figure move past the window, not walking, ducking low, like they didn't want to be seen. That was it. I threw the car in reverse and peeled out of the lot, headlights bouncing wildly as I hit the road. Someone had been waiting for me, and I'd left my car unlocked just long enough. I was back on the interstate, doing 90, hands locked on the wheel, eyes darting between the road and my rearview mirror. My adrenaline was off the charts, and every time I blinked, I pictured someone rising up from the back seat. I kept telling myself I was alone, but that imprint on the seat, the open trunk, the dirt on the mat, someone had been in my car. That was real. About 5 miles out, I saw headlights behind me, small ones, close to the ground. They appeared fast and stayed close. A compact car, maybe a hatchback. I switched lanes to let them pass. They didn't. They stayed behind me, matching my speed. I changed lanes again. So did they. That's when the real panic hit. I was being followed. I spotted an exit with a lit gas station sign and took it without thinking, tires screeching. The car followed. I didn't go to the gas station though. I swerved last second and pulled into a fire station lot across the street. The lights were on inside. I stopped the car, jumped out, and ran straight to the glass door, banging like a maniac. A firefighter opened it almost instantly. I turned and pointed. The car that had followed me was gone, vanished. No taillights, no engine sound, nothing. The firefighter let me in, gave me water, and called the sheriff. I told them everything. They took it seriously. Apparently Rest Stop 43 had a history, reports of people being followed, robbed, even one attempted abduction. I'd almost been another case, all because I left my car unlocked for 5 minutes. I filed a full report, but they never found the person who followed me, or anyone caught on nearby cameras. No plates, no witnesses, just me, a gut feeling, and a string of details that still don't sit right. I haven't stopped at a rest area since. I drive during the day now. Always keep the car locked and check the back seat every single time I get in. People think the danger on the road comes from accidents or falling asleep, but sometimes it's a person you never see, someone who watches, waits, and chooses the exact moment you're vulnerable. So here's my advice. If you're driving at night and see a lonely, well-lit rest stop with no other cars, keep going. If you absolutely have to stop, lock your doors. Don't trust empty parking lots, because I did once. And I'm lucky I got back in that car alone.